Unfortunately, our partner Joe is not here. Early on in this year, he was promoted up to the head office in the Gauteng Department of Education. And so unfortunately, that relationship has dissolved. But Carol and I just spent some time reflecting on what we learned from the program, the highs as well as the lows, and we also do have a couple of recommendations. So we were very grateful to have the opportunity to partner with Realogile Secondary School in Alex. It's a secondary school, 1,800 pupils. The grade 10s, they're 8 classes. Goes from A up to J. So the sheer logistics and the system that school operates in, middle of Alex, right next door to the police station, it's there, it survives. But we sit there waiting for a meeting with Joe, and in comes a mother who just last night broken her daughter's arm because her daughter didn't come home and study. And those are the daily dynamics of a school in Alex. Compared to our really privileged upbringing of fancy schools, where that actually might have happened, but it was never in the reception area of the school. So the partnership taught us many things. Joe was an incredibly passionate, committed person. He would arrive at school 6 o'clock each day. When we first started working with him, at 6:30 he would personally go and inspect each of the toilets in the school to make sure that they were clean. So one of the lessons we were able to pass on to him was, you actually have other people in the school who can do that. You can do a spot check, but you don't have to do it yourself. And he was still able to run the school even though he never had all the teachers there on a day. There were always absent teachers. So if I think back to my corporate days, where you've got tight teams, just imagine trying to run your business where you know that you never have your whole team there every day of the week. He was still able to get the school to function. And yet was not able to fire a drunk teacher that he caught sitting in a shebeen close to the school with photographs. And we learned today from Edward that teacher is still at the school, still going to the shebeen, still drinking, and he's protected by the union. So you just take yourself back to your corporate days. That person would have been out that very day, fired, never come back. So it was really interesting seeing the parallels of working in the corporate world and what principals have to put up with in the school system today. It does take time to build the relationship. Completely agree with the other partners that have said this. This is not a one-year thing. It takes a lot more time to do it. I'm also not sure that principals are taught the basics of running a business, because that's what a school is today, especially a no-fee school. How do you run a school with a tight budget, but there's also money to be spent on stuff? And we found with Joe, it was always a question of, but we don't have money. But he wasn't able to say, well, the budget says I've got 10,000 to do this. How do we use that 10,000? Or if there's 20,000 to do that, how can we maybe move it and use it to pay for that? So as a recommendation for Symphonia, maybe one of the lessons is basic financial training for the principals of how you run it as a business. The other really interesting thing for me was the principals are expected to manage a large organization with virtually zero data. I couldn't believe the manual processes in place of seeing which teachers are there, the marking systems, manual recording of it, and you have a school of 1,800 pupils, how do you pick up the ones that are firstly doing extremely well, that you can identify, you can recognize, you can promote, and those that are actually falling behind? There's no data supporting the teachers. In today's world, where data rules everything, it's a tragedy that the data is not there. The principals are also pulled in all directions. Poor Joe. We'd have a meeting, set it up, I'd arrive, only to hear that he'd been pulled to go to head office. He wasn't his own boss as such. The goals set by Gauteng Department of Education are totally ridiculous. You ask him, what is your matric pass rate goal? He says it's 95%. The reality was the previous year, it was sitting at 55%. Now, how can you expect someone to move from 55% to 95% in 1 year? So when I heard the results of the matric pass rate, what he'd actually done was improved 5% on top of what the average in the Gauteng department was. But he was still downcast because he hadn't achieved the target. Until you can sit and say, hang on, you actually did much better than the average. That is something to be proud of. So, thanks. Also, there are so many different initiatives going on. Joe had to go to Gibbs, he then had another NGO coming in, and there needs to be some means of aligning all of these different initiatives so that everyone is on the same path, because sometimes I think the principals can be overloaded with all of that. So what did we achieve? Some real basics. Joe used to run his own manual diary himself. Never made appointments, so everyone would just barge into his office. So we trained up his secretary, we physically removed his diary, gave it to her, and we set times when parents could come and visit. So he started having a bit more time for himself that he could lead and manage the school. He started to delegate, didn't have to check the loos each day, and he was able to discuss his challenges with us, because I think the principal's life can be a lonely one at times. And he could just unload onto us. This is what he's finding. What can we suggest? We coached one of his deputies. We also had great fun with the matrics, because sometimes you lose sight. It's the school children who really should be the focus in some way. So we do a fun thing where we teach them how to go to your first interview. So we had lots of fun with the matrics for that. We couldn't do the community training with Joe. He was pulled once again to head office. But fortunately, we were able to arrange him go down to Durban. So he was really chuffed. He could get in a plane, get picked up thanks to Richard and his colleague, attend the training down by the sea. So it's really nice when you're actually able to do just something simple like that. And then Carol was able to step in with Floyd when that partnership dissolved. What would we have liked to have done? I would have loved to have got the 3D initiative in Realogile. The DDD, where you're getting the data in that the principals can now see, this is where the pupils are moving, this is how I can manage by exception, rather than just in a huge morass of not quite knowing. Would have loved to work with the financial person who was allocated this year to the school to say, how can we really use the money that you've got and make it work effectively for the school? And we would have loved to have continued the relationship with Joe and with a new head. Edward is standing in, but they need to find a new head. So maybe it will still happen that when there is a new head appointed, we'll be back at Realogile. I hope so. One of the things we do suggest is, at the start of the partnership, maybe there should be a code of behavior. Just some common norms of behavior between the individuals. Kind of like simple things. Commit to return emails and phone calls. I think you struggled there as well, Rowan. It needs to be a joint partnership, working together, and just maybe a bit of code of behavior. And I think also the principals need to be informed that the partners are not buckets of cash coming along. Some partnerships don't have cash, but they do have time, they do have skills, they do have experience. So the principals also need to understand that it's different buckets that people come with. It's not just, here's a checkbook and we're going to write it out for you. And each partnership is different. And the partners need to be told that there's no set plan. You've just got to let the journey evolve. And it is a journey. It does take time. It's not a 1 year, we feel. It's much longer than that. But the partners need to accept that it is going to evolve and just move with time. And 1 year is too short. But we are very grateful. We loved our time there. And hopefully we will be back at Realogile School. Thank you.